So there we are. Good morning, good evening, hopefully not good night for some of you who are following us from around the globe. Now, you're welcome to my Let's Talk today, where we are talk with Helen Ellis about grandparenting from afar. Now, when we raise children abroad, we not always consider that they might want to do the same at some point with their children too, and what it entails to have grandparents living in another country and what it means to grandparenting children from afar is what we are talking about today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Let's Talk series where I share conversations with those who support families navigate their international lives successfully. I might say across cultures and generations today, right? But before we dive into this topic, if you're following us live, please share your questions in the comments so that we can answer them live. And if you watch the recordings, you are very welcome to leave your comments in the questions in the comment section, and we'll continue the conversation there. So today I'm very, very happy to have Helen Ellis as my guest. Helen is from New Zealand. She's a researcher, author, anthropologist, a veteran of distance parenting and grandparenting, and the founder of distancefamilies.com. 3 of her 4 children and 5 of her 6 grandchildren live 16 to 30 flight hours away in America, England, and Scotland. In her research, she asked the question, how is distance familying for you? And her book series combines her personal experience with the expensive global research. Her goal is to support each generation of distance families to understand how it is for the other and pass on some practical tips. So how can we establish a connection and maintain it throughout the years when we don't get to spend much time together? And how can we deal with the guilt and the feeling of missing out on important moments of each other's life? And also make sense of it all in the most healthy way, I would say, for us and for our dear ones. So at some point in your book, you say globalization distances families. We can talk about this in a moment, but please, Helen, tell us more about you, your international journey, and also your book series.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity for being here today. I just honor your work and I learn from you every day, especially when it comes to aspects about multilingualism, because I just speak English and my family speak English. So there's a part of me that I don't experience distance family in quite the same way. But so I'm learning from you all the time. So my journey, well, I decided to go to university as a mature student, and I did a Bachelor of Arts, a part-time, and one of the courses that I had to do right at the end, my lecturer said to me, well, Helen, if you were going to do your master's, what would you do it on? And I thought, oh no, there's no way I'd want to do that. But anyway, I had to give her an answer and learn how you would do a research proposal, because that's what the paper was about. And I thought, well, distance familying, I know about that. Well, she thought that was a great idea. She happened to be a distance grandmother herself. Well, that led to finding out that not one single academic in New Zealand had ever written on the topic. So I thought, well, looks like there's a vacancy. And considering Kiwis fly a lot, that seemed pretty odd to me. So from there, I decided I would do my master's and I would do it specifically on the distance grandparenting side. And then I started to realize that there was very little out there for grandparents in the way of books. I checked them all out and I thought, I think I could do better than that. So that's what I decided to do. And then I realized, well, actually, if I just write about distance grandparenting, it's only 1/3 of the story. Because how is it being a distant son or daughter, the ones who've gone away, and how is it being the distant grandchild? So the whole thing, one course at university, has led to 3 books. So I have written the first one that got published last year, The Grandparenting. The Son and Daughter is right now with the typesetter and will come out on the 7th of July. And sometime in the next couple of years, I will write the grandchild book. So it has been a big journey, and that's how it all happened.
Yes, absolutely, that's amazing. You see how courses or lessons can lead to a widespread kind of production from the students. That's always
Yes.
very rewarding also for those
Yes.
who held the lessons. So
Yes.
yes, we want to dig a little bit deeper into your book and also your experience with grandparenting today. But I would like to say since the beginning that even though maybe in the title that grandparent is in big letters, it is also for the rest of the family. So also for
Yes.
children and for grandchildren to read. I must say, I've listened to it because it's also available in audio format, which is very nice for everyone who knows you also, because it's you who is reading the book. So you have the author actually reading to you the own book. So I would like to talk now about how this grandparenting from afar is different from grandparenting children who live in the neighborhood or even in the same country. I mean, I grew up abroad as well, so I never had grandparents in the same country. They were far away. I saw them maybe once a year, sometimes even only once every 2 years, depending on the situation. So how is this grandparent? Because you are experiencing both. I imagine that you grew up with grandparents close by, but now you are a grandparent who lives very far away from your grandchildren. So.
Well, I've had grandchildren. I've got grandchildren close. I've had 2 that have grown up from very little, and then I've had them far away. So I have experienced both ways. And one of the most important messages I want to get over to everybody, all generations, when you start comparing, is that distance family relationships is not a recipe for everything being all bad. What I mean by that is, hand on heart, I can tell you that I have met many, many distance parents and grandparents who have told me that the strongest relationships with their family is with a family that's the furthest away. And I really want to stress that message. Just because you've chosen to travel away, please be assured there are grandparents and parents who, for you, they're the strongest relationship. It's all about effort and intentionality. But what is different? Well, first of all, I think as grandparents, I have to accept that my grandchildren here feel kind of safer around me. You know, they come and stay. I pick them up from school, all that sort of thing. I'll tell you a little story. Last time I was in the States with my little grandchildren, we were staying in an Airbnb, which happened to be right next door to where my daughter lived. So it was very close, and the children had come and gone. The elder child, and he was 6 at the time, would said to him after a few days, "Would you like to come and sleep at Nanma and Granddad's house?" "Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, he'd like to come." Well, of course, he turned up and went to bed. And then we hear this little voice, "Oh, I want to go home." So, you know, we didn't get all upset about it. You know, he didn't feel quite as safe or as relaxed. So there's that aspect. It will never quite be like it is at home. But, you know, we accept that. They don't know all the nooks and crannies of your house. The little ones know all the nooks and crannies, and that's just really fantastic. Even now, my 22-year-old, who left yesterday for Scotland, back to Scotland, was talking about where the sweets and the confectionery was stored. "Oh, it's in that drawer, the second one on the," you know, that sort of thing. For grandparents who are further away, we kind of lose track of the stages of childhood. We go, "Oh, what do you buy a 6-year-old? What do you buy a 12-year-old for a present? You know, what are they thinking? What are they reading?" You get out of it. You're really out of it. So that's somewhere that the adult children can really help. And also, the distance familying from the grandparents' point of view in both directions can be so much more intentional. And the opposite way here, you know, somebody can just ring me up. "Oh, can you pick the kids up from school? Something's happened, you know, in your days." It's very casual. You're all over the place. But when it's a distance, it can be quite intentional. And only the other day, I was thinking about my vegetable garden. And my little grandkids are going to come at Christmas time, and that's summertime for us. And I thought, no, I'm not going to plant the normal things that I plant. I'm going to plant things that they'll love to go and pick. So we'll do strawberries, and I'll do peas and see if they work, and they can, you know, do the pea potting thing. So this is very intentional. Here it is. What are we? May, and I'm deciding what I'm going to plant in October. I would never do that for my local grandkids. They just got whatever was in the garden, and good luck to them. So, and then my last thing is distance grandparents and parents are what I call pajama grandparents, because you see them in their pajamas. Now, my grandkids here very rarely see me in my pajamas. Well, these days, because they don't stay over, they're big grown-up kids. But they would see me when they stayed over. But when you go and stay with family for a long time, they see you, pajamas, hair at all angles, all that sort of thing, no makeup. So, and I guess my last message is don't compare. Don't compare the familying at home and the familying with yours, because they can be just as successful.
Yes, absolutely. I can. This example that you make of preparing for your grandchildren who come at a certain moment of the year, so that you can share these precious moments or intentionally, reminds me of my grandmother. We used to visit during the summer, and they had an orchard as well, and so I was always present when we would harvest the apples and all the all kind of fruits that you would make jam from. So that was something that I still remember, and I still, when I the smell and the taste of it, it's still there, even though it's, I don't say how many years ago, but almost half a century. So it's something that stays with you, and these special moments, they are much more precious because they are so short. In such a short amount of time, you have to put in everything. And for us, I don't know how it is for your grandchildren and in your family. For us, it was maybe we would spend 2 weeks with the family in Germany, but this meant maybe 3 days with my grandparents, then 2 days with the other ones, then 1 or 2 days with the aunt and uncles, and you would travel around. So it was very, very short amounts of time, chunks of time that then you try to feed your memory from for the whole year to come. So that is, I think, what you just mentioned here, that it can be much more intense with those who come from afar, compared to those who are close. But still, I would like to give a little hint of what it felt from a grandchild, seeing that my grandmother would pick up my cousin from school, or she would know exactly what he was studying, but she had no clue what I was doing. So I always said, it would be nice to once have her knowing what I am up to every single day. But then in the end, later on, that was maybe when I was 5, 7, 10 years old. But then in my teens, I said, no, that would have been so different. And I was fine with how it was. So I think as grandparents and as grandchildren, we go through these phases. Where we would like to have them close. We are happy that they're not so close, and then we are happy again that they are close. So I think you are picturing this, and I think you're going to share more about this in a moment as well.
Yes.
My next question: what are, because you share so many tips and models also on how to make this work in the best way for all kind of scenarios. I like that you picture not only the ideal grandparent, right? Because then you think, okay, I'm not that ideal grandparent, or I'm not that ideal daughter or grandchild. And then someone might say, this is too much, because maybe then I read this book and I have the impression I can't do it. But what you do is you show all the different scenarios that are possible in a very understanding way. I felt guilty sometimes, and then I said, oh no, but here she says, okay, now I feel better again. So that was always a good thing. So keep on reading when you're reading. What are now the effective ways to connect with grandchildren that you can sum up? I mean, we would need to read it all, but just in a nutshell. And children, when you live in different countries for years, it's not only for maybe 6 months, but it's after a year, 10 years, 20, 30 years that we realize what is different. And especially considering that we all have different communication styles and preferences with all regards to all kind of domains.
Exactly. Well, I think there are a couple of overriding things that are very important. First of all, you're not going to be able to have the relationship with these grandchildren is not going to be fantastic if your relationship with the parents as the for the adults isn't fantastic. If there's some angst, if there's some awkwardness, if the mother-in-law doesn't like the daughter-in-law, vice versa. All of those things are going to add to your woes. And it doesn't matter what the fanciest device or new app is. If there's that sort of problem, then that would be something really important to address. And another thing just to keep in mind is a wonderful woman called Dr. Kerry Byrne, who's works with a lot of long-distance grandparents. She taught me one really great thing, and that is that if you're dealing with a 2-year-old, expect to get no more than 2 minutes of a decent communication. If it's a 10-year-old, 10 minutes. That is a really great reality check about what is actually possible, and it's good for people to know that. I have some very active 5 and 7-year-olds, and I can tell you I don't even get 5 or 7 minutes. They're just always wound up like cuckoo clocks. So even that statistic doesn't work. But there's a bunch of little things that I figured out after a while, and I'm going to share them. They call them the 7 rich encounter communication strategies. These are little ideas that you can take with whatever you're doing now, however you communicate with the children, communicate with their parents or yourselves, and just tweak it a little bit. The first one is I call you can't ring a 2-year-old. So for the adult parent, the adult child that's away, you need to take responsibility that you need to initiate most of the communication. Your parents or grandparents can't ring that toddler. So you need to do most of the action work there. And that's fine. They're pleased if you do that. The second one is, do you prefer what I call soft routines or random potluck? Soft routines are every Sunday night we normally talk, and that's when you get to see the children. Or do you like just ringing up whenever and hoping for the best and hoping you catch your parents? And importantly, what do your parents like? Do they like to know that they'll always hear from you on Sunday night? Or do they like it when you ring whenever? Or do they like a mixture of both? Have you asked that question? The next rich encounter strategy is quality versus quantity. Do you like to put the laptop on the kitchen counter while you're getting dinner and just carry on chatting with mum or whoever? Things are happening, the dog's barking, the phone's ringing or whatever, and that's fine with you. Or do you prefer to sit down with a cup of tea and have a quiet chat and give whoever you're talking to or the children with their grandparent the full attention?
Mm-hmm.
What do the children really prefer? What do the grandparents prefer? Have you asked them? Quality versus quantity. Number 4, pretense. We're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Who's saying, is it, hello, how are you? Oh, how are you? Fine, we're fine. If it's always we're fine, maybe not. So, how's those children or the grandparents ask you, how are you? Well, you'll probably still get we're fine. The next time, say, how are you? Well, they'll probably still say we're fine. But the next time, that grandchild might say, well, actually, something happened at school last week and it wasn't much fun. And now you're going to another level. You're going to build that relationship. The next, number 5, is about being on stage. Some people hate being in front of a video. Lots of children hate it, despite social media. They don't want to be there. Lots of adults hate it. They're the ones standing behind the couch or, walking out of the room. Do you like to be on the stage? Do your children like to be on the stage? Do your parents and grandparents like to be on stage? Have you ever asked them? The written word. Number 6, don't ever give up on the written word. Anything your children send in the mail to their parents and their grandparents will never be thrown out. One day, when it's time to clear the home and your parents have passed, you will find those letters. Guaranteed. So don't give up on the written word. And the last one is groups versus one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like having big group conversations, everyone chatting, lots of laughter, and they're fantastic, I'm not knocking them, or do you prefer to have one-on-one quiet chats? This is a very important aspect when it comes to grandchildren communication with grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
When I would look after my grandchildren here, I'd often pick them up from school or take them to dancing or whatever. Those chats in the car were wonderful, and we weren't even looking at each other. I'm driving and they're sitting, but they were fantastic. Those girls would talk about things they never talked to their parents about. We had wonderful times in the car. Are the grandchildren and the grandparents able to have those one-on-one times? Is it something that you could set up, something you could initiate? And just leave it to them. They have those chats. So those, my 7 rich encounter strategies. Find out what works for you, what works for your kids, what works for the grandparents, and see if you can tweak things just a little bit so that what you're doing now, you can just take it to the next level. It's fantastic if you can do that.
Yes. Absolutely. I like them all. And when I went through these steps, I said, oh, yes, this is something that bothers me. For example, if I call someone and they are obviously not there with their head. Yeah. And I call maybe once every 2 weeks, and I realize that they are not really following what I'm saying. They say, yeah. And by the way, did I tell you? And then I said, did you listen to what I was saying? So these are the moments where you say, okay, this is now a missed opportunity to really connect, because you are communicating, but it's one way. And I can say, well, now it's almost 40 years that I'm not living in the same country as my parents or my sister. These kind of connections, they change over time, right? And our expectations and our needs change over time as well. So I saw that happening many, many times. What I really like in these parts is that you put the accent on the listening and acknowledging also what the other person or the other persons, if it's a group, need, or how they like to communicate. And this is where the communication styles come in, right? Because especially when we are talking maybe about families who have different cultures and languages, let's let the languages a little bit aside, but different cultures, there's different ways to communicate. Maybe the screen time, you mentioned that not everyone is comfortable on being on screen or being in a group while chatting with grandparents or with whoever there is. So acknowledging that and knowing that, and not making it feel awkward, or not feeling guilty that I am like this and you are like that, or wanting the other person to adapt, although you know that the other person that can't go out of her comfort zone in that kind of setting. So that is a very, very powerful message, I think, that is all towards, we want to keep this connection alive throughout years. It's not about the heat in the moment. I mean, we always have moments where we argue maybe, or where we are not on the same page, and where maybe our parents or whoever it is in the family has something to say about how we are leading our lives, etc. All kind of situations. But if we don't lose this long haul kind of relationship that we want to establish and to maintain, that helps a lot. And I found that you explained it very, very clearly in a way that didn't make me feel guilty.
Oh no!
So you can, because that was one thing that we talked about, I think, before even talking about having this interview, was the guilt, the fear of maybe losing the contact, and the guilt. At some point in your book, you also talk about the fact that when you, as a parent, you realize your child is going to live abroad, and it's like saying goodbye forever, because you know that maybe the relationship or how it was until now, it will change. And acknowledging this, or not hoping that they will come back and live in your house again. It can happen.
No, thank you.
Yes, but it can happen. And I know several parents who were very happy that their children would come back for different reasons. And also now during the pandemic, they were very happy that they could live under one roof.
Oh, yes. Okay.
even though it was difficult. But
Okay.
in certain situations, you
Oh,
welcome
yes.
that, and I'm sure you do.
Oh, definitely. Oh, no. I mean,
Yes,
there's all sorts of different situations, but
absolutely. Yes.
yeah,
So we
exactly.
can you cover many different situations.
Mm,
So I think there are a lot of aha and yes, exactly moments for everyone who is
mm,
reading this. So talking about this guilt that I just mentioned, I know it's not a very nice topic, but it
mm,
comes up for everyone, I think.
mm.
The tips or kind of what is your experience with dealing better with this sense of guilt or with this feeling of missing out or of very important moments in the life of our dear ones?
Well, I think that what I've written about is the fact that, first of all, I think the guilt that, well, first of all, I make it very clear to the grandparents in the grandparents book that guilt is your biggest emotion. Sometimes I've had conversations with distant parents and distant grandparents, and I've said to them, did you know that the guilt of the left behind family is the strongest emotion that expats and migrants experience? And they look at me, they go, really? Honestly, most of them don't know. So my book makes it very clear. They will definitely know in a very nice way that that's what is the most, strong emotion that you feel. So my take on the guilt is that I think it's really important to divide it between the guilt that is imposed by yourself and the guilt that's imposed upon you.
Mm-hmm.
My attitude to the guilt that you impose on yourself is that I see it's all because you care.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an admirable quality. The world would be an amazing place if it was full of caring people like you. If you didn't give a whatever about your family, then that wouldn't be ideal. So just know that the guilt that you feel that you impose on yourself is because you care.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's really important to remember. The things you miss out on, it is hard. It is hard, and it's hard at the other end. But you've made a decision that this is what you're going to do. And you'll have your moments, but it's important to ride through it. The other guilt is the guilt that's imposed upon you. Let me read you what I've written in my next book. This guilt is from others and comes from their place of grief, disappointment, and heartache. I would also add it comes from ignorance and to some degree selfishness on the part of your family back home. I tell the grandparents that one of their jobs is to accept. We said to our kids, I said it myself, you can do anything, take on the world, go for it. And that's exactly what they've done. They've become strong, independent global citizens. So our job as the grandparents is to accept that we raised these children. And that's one of the big messages that I want to get through in a very nice way. So I think it's important to balance out that grief and realize that the grief that you've imposed upon yourself is from a place of caring. And you don't
Mm-hmm.
ever want to change that person.
No,
That's love, you know.
yes,
And then the
absolutely.
other grief, the other one is the other guilt is imposed upon you by people who don't understand all the time. And it sort of comes with the territory, but it shouldn't be taken on heart and on board in quite the same way, because you're not making it, they're making it. Yeah. The other thing that I've picked up as well, and I try and explain this to grandparents, is that when they don't accept and when they cause all this problem for you, then you tend to not tell them what's going on. So I tell the grandparents, don't load lots of guilt on them, because you're not going to share what's happening on a day-to-day basis or new plans that you might have or where you might be moving next or whatever. So they miss out. And I think it's good if they know that, because they might change their behavior. So I give them lots of ways they might be talking to you that aren't particularly helpful, and how they could do it in a different way. And it's always a little bit of a wake-up call for them in a very nice way.
Yes, absolutely. I like this kind of lesson somehow that you are giving to grandparents to to actually also listen a little bit more in between the lines. I know it's very
Yes.
difficult if you are in the same room. It's even more difficult if you are on screen or on a telephone, or if the line is not that good. So if there are some interruptions, whether it is small children or other noises or something. But I like this don't load your guilt or your fears or your expectations on your children, because as I said before, it very often for us it is you look forward to connecting with your family that one time in the week, maybe. At least I don't call my parents every day. I do it maybe once a week or every few weeks, depending on the availability of both sides, and it sometimes just doesn't work. But when you walk away from these calls and you say, well, I wasn't even able to say anything important for me because I was only listening to what they were saying, and what they were missing, that they're missing us and that they're not feeling well, etc. So at some point, I think this part is underestimated. Yeah, it really affects you for many, many days afterwards, as a child or as a grandchild. I remember also with my grandparents who have had some issues, and then I said, okay, this time it went over. They didn't even ask how I was feeling. This how are you feeling, how are you, that you mentioned before. I was smiling when you said it, because, well, I said in English you always say, how are you? I'm fine. Yeah, that's fine. Between terrible to fantastic, that's just a line, right? It can be everything. And there it is important to know how to read in between the lines, or to ask maybe more open questions, right? How is school, and how was your coursework or whatever at work? How is it going? Or how's your health? Because otherwise we really miss out, and then this stays with us. And the next time that we go on the phone or on the screen, we have the impression we continue from where we've left. At least this is my impression every time. It's not you start from scratch, but it's like you continue from where you left the last time. And if this feeling is negative or not being heard, you almost resist on calling. And that's something from a grandchild or a child that lives abroad. I can imagine it's the same also from a grandparent who is calling, and maybe the others are sharing everything, but they don't really ask about what is going on where you are. And there is one aspect I think you mentioned also, this kind of meeting our children and grandchildren. Of course, there are other generations, but meeting them on the same level is very important too. Yeah, not I'm the parent and you're the child, so I'm the one telling, or I'm the one who has the first say, and you are the one who has to follow or somehow respond to my needs first. But everyone has the same amount of right to have their needs met. So that is very often, I see it at least cross-culturally also. It's an aspect of cross-culture, raising children cross-culturally or living cross-culturally and having parents maybe in another culture. This mutual understanding of the needs is very, very strong sometimes. Especially when then you say, well, when I was your age, I could do this, or that was so easy, but that's not helpful, right?
No, it's absolutely not. No. I agree with you. And I mean, the best communications are when you're asking questions, isn't it? And when you ask questions about the other, they always want to talk with you. They always want to have another chat. And, maybe in time they will gather that it's about time they asked questions coming back the other way. But as long as you're asking questions, if you want to be intentional about distance familying, if you're always asking questions, then you can't go wrong, really. But it is frustrating when they don't come back. We have plenty of that. I know exactly what it's like.
It's nicer also to have the impression it's like a conversation. Yeah, you have the basic conversations or communication or effective communication is always when it's like a ping pong play or a tennis play. You have once the ball in your court and then you send it back, and it's a giving and taking. And if that is out of balance, then one part will always feel like guilt, shame, whatever.
Well,
So
it's hard work.
it is hard work. It is
It's hard
harder work
work.
because it's all.
Yeah.
I had the impression that these calls or these moments, also if you meet in person, it's like having the relationship under a magnifying glass. It's really, and that sticks with you. That impression stays with you for months. And if there is one little piece that is a little bit black or not so nice, it's magnified, and that's something where I know we all need a psychologist in our life that can help us, or a coach or a consultant or something. But what I like in what you mentioned also in your book is this regular recalibrating the relationship with our dear ones, where you mentioned at some point that especially the middle generation, so the children, the parents of the grandchildren, have there are gatekeeper, or how do you call
Gate
the others?
opener.
It's a gate opener.
Yes.
And then you say also the power they have actually to keep it open, this gate open towards the grandchildren, but not only to the grandchildren, but to the rest of the family and to this relationship over time. Would you like to say something about that, maybe?
Yes, I think it goes back to your question about effective ways to connect with the grandchildren, is the fact that, there's always some new device coming out or some new app. I get people contacting me, I've got this new app for talking to grandchildren. I'm going, it's all very well, but if the mother-in-law doesn't like the daughter-in-law, it's not going to work, So these sorts of things, the gatekeeping and the gate opening, are you a gate opener? Do you make it easy for your parents to talk to your children, or have you raised your children so that you're not putting your parents down in front of them and they're going, well, I don't want to talk to that person, because mum and dad say this and that about grandma and granddad. Are you trying to make this relationship work as best as possible? So are you a gate opener? Are you proactive? Are you setting up times? Are you sending an email and say, what say we catch up next week? Or are you a gatekeeper and you're making it really tricky? And, and it's very easy to flip-flop a little bit, but I've experienced them, all the different types, and it's very hard if you've got a gatekeeper in your family, and it's just very hard to get answers and messages, and there's a lot of control happening. So it's a good question to ask, am I a gate opener? Am I trying to make this thing work as best as I can? We're not wanting perfection here. We're just wanting to be just an encourager to make it happen. Or am I a gate opener or a gate closer? So yeah, it's a really important thing. And the grandparents can be the same. They can make it really difficult and say, well, it's the time zones and this and that, and we have to be a little bit flexible. I tell them, you need to be prepared to talk in your pajamas and have camera. Here in New Zealand, the time zones are not fantastic. And, many a time I'm caught in my pajamas sitting at the breakfast bar having my breakfast. So, if you start getting all precious about that, I haven't had a shower, I haven't done my hair. Well, that's stupid. So that's being a gatekeeper if the grandparents are doing that. So, all we can do is the job that we can do ourselves in our role within the distance family. So think about whether you're a gate opener or a gatekeeper. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you mentioned this also in the context, because not every family is on good terms all the time. I mean, it's very normal that we have moments where we are not so in good terms, and but knowing that they will be over and that we have to work on that actively, like you said, it's hard work. It's harder work if you don't see someone, because then you assume what the other person might be thinking or doing, or how she will react. But that's even the moment where we have to, where it's very important for every member that is involved to know, okay, we want to keep in touch. That this is the first thing. And I would like to make a comparison to to what I experience with families who maintain their languages or don't maintain their languages over generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they at some point say, okay, now we live there and my parents are far away, they cannot visit, so we drop that language. And that is sometimes really like excluding that communication over generations that might be or should be or could be, and most times it is, very precious for the grandchildren to have. If a grandchild cannot speak with a grandparent, it is affecting their relationship, it's affecting their health and their sense of identity and everything. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I don't know about
neither am I.
the effects of that. We were talking also about, you mentioned also the emotional resilience, right, that we need to have. And you quote also Linda Janssen's book about the emotional resilience of the expat child, of the expat or the grandparent living abroad, right? That needs to be somehow built, and also the grandchildren. I'm sure that you are mentioning this also in your other books that are coming out now on the 7th of July, like we said, in 2022.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yes, that's the one on your in your bag, the distant son or daughter.
Yeah.
But also with the grandchildren. So I'm wondering if we have some comments. We have some comments. We have a Facebook user. Not everyone is there with their name. Thank you. They're thanking us. And another one says, hello, please feel free to ask questions. I know it's maybe not a very convenient time for everyone, but it would be nice if you could ask questions in the chat. So I was thinking about another aspect that you highlight in your book, and or that you mention, the importance of a temporary bubble of intimacy. This bubble came with me, and every now and then it just shows up in my mind. I said, oh, this is an intentional bubble of intimacy. Whether you are there in person or you are anywhere else, right, in the world.
Yeah.
Can you please maybe share a few details about it, or
Sure.
how this looks like?
Well, it goes back to, it was one of those 7 rich encounter strategies.
Yes.
And it was this question of, whether you have the group connections or the one-on-ones. So they're all important. They're all important. But if you had a culture within your family or within the grandparents that they were catching up with their grandchildren one-on-one on a regular basis. Say, for example, the middle generation said to their 10-year-old, okay, we've got a new job for you. Once a month, we want you to dial up and talk to your grandparents, and you organize it, you do it, you're in your bedroom, you have a chat with them, and you could, gen the parents up, grandparents up, and say, look, this is what you could talk about, whether it's soccer or art or whatever the thing is that's the hot topic at the moment. And just start slowly. See if they'd be keen to do that. So it's this rhythm. Honestly, if grandparents could talk to a grandchild once a month, all by themselves, that's the greatest gift. They will treasure it. They will rearrange their whole day to make it happen, and it will fuel them for another whole month. It's, we're talking 30 minutes once a month. But it's got to be a rhythm, a routine, something that the children decide they're pleased to do. This is what I'm going to do. Or a saying that we had in our family was, this is what our family does. Full stop. So, the same children are chatting to their friends and, TikTok and everything all over the world. They could probably manage 30 minutes with a grandparent. Now, it might be a little bit weird at the beginning, but I think if everybody's tuned in and everybody wants to make it work, and there's not like massive big expectations, it can just evolve just like it was when I was picking up my granddaughters from school, kindergarten, taking them in the car. It's that sort of chat, it's nothing profound, but each time it will progress. That is what I call a temporary bubble of intimacy when it comes to distance familying. And when you meet each other, and you holiday or vacation together, then you get those moments. I remember the day I took our grandson in the UK. He's cricket and sports mad. we went into London and we went and visited Lord's Cricket Ground. Now, for those who aren't into cricket, you'll wonder why on earth that's a particular thing to do. But if you're English and, you know, this is the holy grail, you know. And so we did a tour of this ground. Well, I can still remember that. I still remember that feeling of being allowed to take him on the train into London and on the bus and take him out for lunch and bring him home. We treasure that. That kept us going for ages and ages. So if it's like that, those little temporary bubbles of intimacy are fuel. They will make up for an awful lot of stuff in between. So this is a routine that families may like to consider taking on and giving their children responsibility. It's your job. Once a month, you connect, you arrange it. You know, it's not my job. This is your job. Full stop.
Yes, and I like this idea, and I'm sorry that I missed that with my children, but I think I would encourage others to do this. But I find it very important that it happens throughout the year until the moment that you might meet in person, because this also then helps the parents to have more trust in the grandparents, because the grandparents know what the child is interested in.
Yes.
Or what the child they can talk about this outing wherever it is, where it is cricket or tennis or whatever, or going to the movies, or just going to the playground. They can somehow prepare also. Okay, we're going to grandma, and you're going to go to that playground that she talked about, or you're going to watch that movie that is not coming out here in the next few months, but there you will be able to watch it in a premiere or whatever. So these kind of things that you can build up, not only the relationship with a grandchild, but also build the trust with your children, that they can trust their children with you. Because I think that is one aspect that I wanted to highlight very briefly. I mean, I know it depends on the family situation, and every situation, every family is different. But there were some situations in my personal life where I said, oh, you know, I had twins. Yeah, I had 3 children under 4. And then telling my parents, can you take care of them? Or they hadn't seen them in a year. That was very difficult for me to let it go and to say, you can go and have a walk with them, because they were not so young anymore, so not so alert. They didn't know how my children react on the playground, how they behave on the street. So I was worried. So I think these kind of situations can be avoided if you build this trust over the time. And so sometimes we miss that, but we can come up with other solutions afterwards. So we can fix that. That, like you said before, we can always rekindle and we can always readapt. And then at some point we can let go, and then they visit their grandparents, and they can have moments, these bubbles of intimacy also in their own ways. To make an example, my son likes to play chess, and he had moments where he played chess with my father, who also likes to play chess. So these were their moments of intimacy through play, through exchanging their strategies and confabulando, like we say in Italian. I like that word, about strategies and ways of playing, and then also that led to speaking and talking about things that were not related with the game. So it bridges somehow also to other conversations and other ways of connecting with the children or with the grandparents. Great.
Fantastic.
That was fantastic. Yes. I know yes, you wanted to add something?
No, fine.
No, okay. I wanted to ask you another question about the 5 tips. I always try to finish maybe with some tips, but we can also continue afterwards. I have another question in mind. But the 5 tips that you would give to those who grandparent from afar. I mean, in your book, there are plenty of tips. You can have a whole series of tips for different situations. But if you would say it in a nutshell, if someone is saying, oh, I find grandparenting so difficult, what would this be?
My number 1 is, and I've said it just before, accept your situation. Even if you navigate it in a sort of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I would say to the grandparents, you raised your children. You told them to take on the world, and that's exactly what they've done. And you need to take responsibility for being a great parent and producing independent, wonderful adults. They've got to own that and stop feeling sorry for themselves. All right. The second thing is, I would make them understand, and I've said that before, that the strongest emotion that the adult children experience is the guilt. And know that and understand it. Number 3, I would tell them to be proud of your children and tell them that often. Number 4, accept that kids are kids. Now, it doesn't matter how wonderfully our distance adult middle generation try and set up a Zoom call or a Skype call with little Johnny. But if little Johnny doesn't want to talk to Nana right now, well, too bad, So kids are kids. We can't have them super perform every time. They just are. And it's the same at home. We'll have the children over here and, they don't all perform all the time. So it's just the same back home. And my last number 5 tip is, what opportunities are open to you as a grandparent, distant parent now, because your time is freed up a bit? You know what? Every Saturday night is free. You can do whatever you want. Nobody's going to ask you to babysit. That's not bad. This book series would not have happened, I'm pretty sure of that, if my current batch of little grandchildren lived close to me. I'm pretty sure I'd have a few other duties. So look what's happened. I've done my master's, I'm doing these books, and the travel that we've had, things we've been able to tag on. I know COVID's been a really horrible interruption to that, and I totally get it, and we've suffered big time. But normally we've tagged on so many things in our travels, and we've had some great times when the kids have come here. So what opportunities are open to you now? It's all about turning a negative into a positive. So I think we have, as distance parents, distance grandparents, a duty to go, okay, well, what are we going to do now? And turn it around. Those are my 5 tips.
Absolutely perfect. That's fantastic. Yes, I can accept all of them and more. Especially the last one, turn the negatives. If they feel negative, turn them into positive. See how you can turn them into positive, or which aspect of the negative moment can be turned around so that it becomes positive. And I had a discussion lately with, it was a mother, but I also had a similar discussion with a grandparent lately. Due to this pandemic that we had, and we were very distant for several reasons, and we couldn't meet in person and actually also transmit our language in the ways that we usually do when we are abroad. That's to say, finding our community there. And there was a grandparent. There are a lot of apps and a lot of online books that you can read with your grandchildren, no matter their age, also with the very young ones. As you said, if it's 5 minutes, it's 5 minutes. If it's 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes. If it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. So it's not judging the amount of time, but the time, even the time slot that you book with your grandchild or child. And she was saying that her grandchild was boosting practically her language skills thanks to these moments where she was reading with him. It was a boy in another country, and she was reading just the books that she had or the newspaper. And he's between 8. He was 8 at the beginning. Now he's 10. So they kept on doing it. Now the situation is better, and they are going to meet in the summer. But she said was just one appointment per week, and he said I have an appointment with grandma. So it was he's very, very precise. He said at that time, I need the screen and I want to see grandma because we have to continue the story. I want to know what happens next. And she was she was the only one allowed to read that book. And it was Harry Potter, but she was allowed to read that book that he knew a little bit in the school language, but she was reading it in her language, which was very helpful because he knew what was happening, so she could somehow give the input in her language, in her way, and talk about this. And she was very keen to do so. I know not every grandparent is up for this, and not everyone, but we can find ways, right, to connect with our parents, with our grandparents, with the grandchildren, with the children. So I think I'm happy to put really your book on the foreground, but it's all the advice and the tips that you're giving are very, very helpful for every family that lives kilometers apart, miles, time zones apart, and who want to stay connected, which is in the end the reason why we want to keep our families going ahead, and the intention to even have families, right, to stay connected and to be on the same page, even if we are in different time zones. Thank you very, very much, Helen. I could go on and on. I would like to have you back when you when you have published your Distant Son and Daughter, because I want also to see what I can find. But as I said before, even though this first book is for grandparents, I can highly recommend it also to children or of these grandparents, and to the grandchildren of these grandparents, so to all three generations, and also to cousins and aunts and uncles and everyone. So to understand how this whole functions and works, right? That it's this mutual understanding that you say. And what I also would like to focus on, or to briefly mention, is that not every family is different. And there are also families who have big problems to communicate and to stay in contact for different reasons. And I find it important also to not feel anyone guilty about the fact that maybe their communication or their connection is not working so well. Sometimes you can feel sad or guilty, like I said, if we see, oh, this works for them, they meet again, they go out with their grandchildren, but my parents don't do this. Or my parents don't have any interest. My parents are not good communicators, or they couldn't care less about that. And this makes you very, very sad. So that would be something where I would like to just add a little thing. If your parents or grandparents are not that kind of people who want to invest in that, then we can still change the narrative. Yeah, we can be the first grandparents of being like that.
Yes. So, break the mold, break the routine. Exactly. Show, be an example to your children of how you would like it to be when it's your turn. And
absolutely.
Yeah. An attitude that you can take to those difficult relationships is, say, for example, you're the daughter-in-law and your mother-in-law is not your favorite person. You take it, the attitude, and I write about this a lot in the Son and Daughter book, and give you some great places to read more than what I've got to say. And that is that you maintain that relationship in a very polite and pleasant manner because someone else wants you to. So your partner, your spouse, wants you to have a relationship of sorts with your mother-in-law, even if your mother-in-law is an absolute pain. So you have that relationship. It's not super cozy, but it's polite, and you do what needs to be done because somebody would like you to do that. And there's a lot of value in that.
Absolutely.
And so I think that there's many people in our lives, and not just our mother-in-law, that we have to do that with, whether it's a boss or a teacher or someone. You have that relationship, you keep it pleasant because somebody would appreciate you doing so.
Yes, but in order to do that, in the relationship that we have with the other adults in our life, and we are talking now about the parents or the children, we need to find a way to have an adult conversation and not fall into these kind of roles where the parents are there and the children are there. And I saw this very, very clearly in relationships or in cultures where you need to respect the elderly. I'm totally fine with that. That completely makes sense. And I wish that it would be in other places too. But it can also lead to children being somehow always following the lead of the parents and not having a say. And this is where somehow the disbalance can happen, especially in cross-cultural marriages, where then maybe one has one kind of constellation of the grandparents and the children and the grandchildren, and the other one the other ones, and then they can clash, and they can even form more difficult situations. But this is for another book, maybe, or this is for another.
Yeah, I'm sure that you could write a whole book about that one. And I guess, there comes a point when the children, and especially these third culture kids, they're pretty aware of so much, where you can have that conversation. And I would imagine, having not lived that myself, but say, have you noticed that we communicate this way with that set of parents and this way with the other set of grandparents? Let's talk about that. Why do we do that? And one isn't wrong, one isn't right. It's not a competition. Exactly. It's a great learning thing, and they start to understand that themselves. And I think of it actually in my own life. I'll tell the story, but this is my second marriage, and I've been married for over 30 years, so it's a long time. But when I brought up my children that came from my first marriage, I always said to them, "You've got two dads, aren't you lucky?" And that was my line for a long time, until they got to about 13, 14, 15. And then they kind of started asking a few questions. What happened? And then they started to make some decisions for themselves. But I continued that on. So I can imagine that there are times when things would change. You're in a different era. That child's growing up. You can have a different conversation with them. And and that happened to us. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And the intergenerational kind of relationship is something that we all need to work on in some ways. And also in patchwork families, we have another kind of setting. And if these patchwork families come from different cultures, we have another one. But it's very fascinating and very interesting. And also to see that there are always solutions for that. And the less we stick to this is how we do it and we cannot change it, the better we can work on the communication to become more effective and beneficial and healthy, actually, across generations. So I like what you mentioned in your book, that we have this task that you mentioned several times, or the duty of accepting. The grandparents have the duty to accept, and the same is also valid for the children. You have the duty to accept that grandparents or that children have the right or have the need, etc. But we could go on and on.
I know, we could be here all night.
I'm looking forward to having you back on screen and talking a bit more about this later on, maybe after your second book is out. So where can we find you? Where can people follow you?
Okay. Well, I have founded distancefamilies.com. You can see it on the screen, and it's a distance with a C, not a T, because it's all about the geography. So that is a place where I have, put information about my books, and I load a lot of articles and interviews and various things. So there's quite a few resources, contacts for different sorts of counselling I've come across along the way. And there's a link to where you can buy my books. So they're on all the platforms, Amazon, and they're all there. So the grandparent book that's been out for a year is available in paperback and ebook, and also by audio, which Urda's experience. And I have to say, my son does the introduction. So it's a real family affair. And then the Distant Son and Daughter book is coming out on the 7th of July. It's not quite ready for pre-order, but it will be in a few weeks. And if you follow me somewhere on social media, go to my website and just look at the follow page, and it's all there, Instagram, Facebook, the whole works. You'll be well and truly, or sign up on my newsletter. That's an email newsletter, is a really good idea. Then you won't miss out. You will not miss out on knowing that it's available. And just to recap again, you said about all generations reading the books. You'll notice that the subtitle on all three books is exactly the same. So it is a book for all generations. So just because it's got grandparent on the cover or son and daughter, you can give the son and daughter book to your parents, and they can, give you a grandparent book. There's lots that we can learn from each other. And it comes back to my kind of mantra for the whole thing. When you understand how it is for the other, as in the other generations, that creates empathy. And empathy is a good thing for distance families. Thank you.
That's perfect. I should now not say anything else. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Helen, for everything, and for your wisdom and the amazing tips and suggestions that you give. But before we say goodbye to everyone who followed us, thank you very much for those who followed us live, and for your comments and for your likes. And for those who will just watch the recording, please continue the conversation in the comments on YouTube or on Facebook, and we'll be happy to respond to them and to continue the conversation with Helen about this topic and the next topics coming up. I wish you everyone a very nice rest of the day, evening, night, morning, and I hope to see you back soon. Bye. Thank you, Helen.
Bye, everyone. See you.